Have you ever stopped to wonder why you think the way you do? Why some thoughts push you forward while others hold you back? What if I told you that the quality of your life depends largely on the quality of your thinking patterns? Every decision you've ever made, every mistake, every success, every dream you've chased or abandoned, started first as a thought. But here's the truth. Most of us never take the time to examine our own thinking. We move on autopilot, following old habits, old beliefs, and repeating the same cycles without realizing it. Now imagine this. What if you could learn to master your thoughts instead of being mastered by them? What if you could recognize when your mind is tricking you, break free from limiting beliefs, and start making clearer, stronger, more confident choices every single day? This audiobook, Mastering Critical Thinking, Understanding Thought Patterns for Personal Improvement, is your personal guide to doing just that. Together, we will uncover the hidden forces shaping your mind, challenge assumptions that have held you back, and build a new way of thinking, one that empowers you to improve your life step by step. So let me ask you, are you ready to take control of your thoughts before they control you? Are you ready to think differently so you can live differently? If your answer is yes, then let's begin. Before we dive in, we've noticed that most people who listen to our audiobooks never subscribe to the channel. So do me and yourself a favor. Like this video, share it with someone who's ready to grow, and subscribe to this channel so you never miss more empowering content designed to help you grow. Chapter 1: The Foundation of Critical Thinking. Let me start by asking you a simple but powerful question. Have you ever wondered why two people can face the same situation and yet see it completely differently? One person panics, while another stays calm and finds a solution. One sees a challenge as a wall, while another sees it as a door waiting to be opened. The difference is not luck. It's not even intelligence in the way we normally think of it. The real difference lies in their thinking patterns, the habits of thought that shape how they see the world and how they act in it. This is where critical thinking comes in. What critical thinking really means. Critical thinking is often misunderstood. Many believe it means being critical, always pointing out flaws, always questioning others, or being skeptical of everything. But that's not true. Critical thinking is the ability to think clearly and rationally, to question assumptions, and to make decisions based on logic and evidence rather than emotions or bias. It's the skill of stepping back, analyzing information, and asking, does this really make sense? One of the best ways to understand this is to look at the story of Abraham Lincoln, the former president of the United States. Lincoln was not considered the most educated man of his time, but he had a remarkable gift. He thought deeply. When faced with the Civil War, he refused to act on impulse or public pressure alone. He weighed different sides, considered long-term consequences, and questioned both his own beliefs and those of his advisors. His ability to slow down and think critically allowed him to make decisions that shaped history. Lincoln once said, "Give me 6 hours to chop down a tree, and I will spend the first 4 sharpening the axe." That is the heart of critical thinking, not rushing into action, but sharpening your mind before making decisions. Why critical thinking matters in everyday life. Now, let's bring this closer to your world. Critical thinking is not just for leaders or politicians. It matters in everyday life, in work, and in relationships. Think about this. When you receive a message on social media that stirs your emotions, do you pause to verify the information before sharing? When someone disagrees with you, do you immediately argue back, or do you take a moment to understand their perspective? When you face a big decision about your career, your finances, or your family, do you jump to conclusions, or do you carefully weigh the options? These are the moments when critical thinking makes all the difference. Let me give you a workplace example. Imagine a company facing declining sales. One manager reacts with panic and blames the sales team. Another manager takes time to gather data, customer feedback, market trends, and product quality. The second manager may discover that the real issue is not the sales team at all. It's the product packaging or the pricing. By thinking critically, that manager saves the company from wasting energy on the wrong solution. In relationships, critical thinking matters just as much. How many arguments between couples, friends, or even co-workers could be avoided if one person simply paused and asked, "Am I reacting emotionally, or am I really understanding what this person is saying?" Critical thinking is not about being cold or distant. It's about being intentional with your thoughts, so your emotions serve you instead of controlling you. How thought patterns shape who we are. Here's the truth. Your thoughts create your reality. Every action begins as a thought. Over time, repeated thoughts become habits, and those habits become your character. Let's take another example from history. Angela Merkel, the former German chancellor. Merkel was trained as a scientist before she entered politics. That background shaped her thought patterns. She was known for her calm, deliberate decision-making style. She didn't rush into public debates or emotional reactions. Instead, she would listen carefully, analyze details, and make choices based on evidence. Over time, her consistency built trust, and she became one of the most respected leaders of her era. What made her so effective wasn't just intelligence, it was the discipline of her thought patterns. She approached problems with patience, logic, and an openness to new information. Your own life works the same way. If your thought pattern is always negative, you will constantly see obstacles, even when opportunities are in front of you. If your thought pattern is always defensive, you will see every comment as an attack. But if you build a thought pattern of curiosity, openness, and rational questioning, you will begin to see possibilities where others only see problems. The author James Allen once wrote in his classic book, As a Man Thinketh, "The mind is the master weaver, both of the inner garment of character and the outer garment of circumstance." In other words, your thoughts shape not just who you are inside, but the life you experience on the outside. Practical steps to strengthen your foundation. So, how do we start building this foundation of critical thinking? Let me give you 3 practical steps you can begin today. Practice the pause. Before reacting to information, especially when emotions are high, pause. Ask yourself, do I have all the facts? Is there another perspective I'm missing? Ask better questions. Instead of asking, why is this happening to me? Ask, what can I learn from this? What are the possible solutions? Great thinkers don't look for blame, they look for answers. Challenge your assumptions. Every once in a while, write down a belief you hold strongly. Then ask yourself, what if the opposite were true? What evidence supports this belief? What evidence goes against it? This exercise builds mental flexibility. Key takeaways from this chapter. Critical thinking is not about criticizing. It's about clarity, logic, and rational judgment. It matters in every area of life, at work, in relationships, and in personal growth. Your thought patterns shape your decisions, your habits, and ultimately your destiny. Leaders like Lincoln and Merkel show us that calm, deliberate, evidence-based thinking leads to lasting success. By practicing the pause, asking better questions, and challenging assumptions, you begin to build the foundation of a critical thinker. So let me ask you again, do you control your thoughts, or do your thoughts control you? As you move forward in this audiobook, remember this. Every great journey begins with a single step, and the first step toward mastering your mind is awareness. If you found value in this first chapter, make sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss the upcoming lessons. Share this audiobook with someone you care about, because when we think better, we live better. Now, let's move on to Chapter 2, where we'll dive deeper into the science of thought patterns, how your brain creates loops of thinking, and how you can rewire them for success. Chapter 2, the science of thought patterns. Let me ask you a simple question. Have you ever noticed how certain thoughts seem to come back again and again, almost like a song stuck on repeat? Maybe it's the worry about what others think of you. Maybe it's the belief that you can't achieve something because you failed once before. Or maybe it's the uplifting reminder that you've got this, that keeps you moving forward even when things feel heavy. This is not random. It is the science of thought patterns at work. Our brains are like recording machines. Every experience, every choice, every reaction leaves a trace in the form of a pathway. Neuroscientists often describe it this way. Neurons that fire together, wire together. This phrase, popularized by Dr. Donald Hebb in his book The Organization of Behavior, 1949, means that the more often you think a certain thought, the stronger the connection in your brain becomes. Over time, that thought becomes easier to think, until it becomes a habit. Think of it like walking through a grassy field. The first time you cross, it's difficult. You have to push the tall grass aside. But if you keep walking the same path every day, soon the grass flattens, and a clear trail forms. That is how thought loops are created. Your brain builds highways of repeated thinking. Now let's break this down into two types: positive thought cycles and negative thought cycles. Positive versus negative thinking cycles. A positive cycle might begin with a simple thought. I am capable of learning this. That thought sparks confidence, which influences your actions. You study, you practice, you stay committed. When results improve, your brain rewards you with a sense of accomplishment. That success reinforces the original thought, making it easier to believe next time. On the other hand, a negative thought cycle might start with, I will never be good at this. That single thought triggers doubt, hesitation, maybe even procrastination. Because of that hesitation, your performance drops. The poor result then seems to prove the original thought correct, making the belief even stronger. And just like that, you find yourself stuck in a loop of self-sabotage. One world leader who exemplifies breaking negative cycles and embracing positive ones is Abraham Lincoln. His early life was filled with failure. He lost businesses, faced repeated political defeats, and suffered personal tragedies. A negative thought pattern could have destroyed him, but Lincoln trained himself to see setbacks as lessons. Each defeat became part of a larger loop of persistence. By the time he became president, his resilience was unmatched, and his thought patterns were rooted in patience, endurance, and clarity. Contrast that with leaders in history who allowed negative thought cycles, such as fear, mistrust, or pride, to dominate their decisions. Entire nations have collapsed under leaders who could not escape their own destructive patterns of thought. It shows us the power of mental loops, not just for individuals but for societies. How habits shape thought. Here's the crucial point. Your habits are the fuel for your thought patterns. When you wake up and immediately check your phone for bad news, you prime your brain for negativity. That habit strengthens a loop of worry and distraction. But if you begin your morning with gratitude or a small win, like exercising or journaling, you prime your brain for progress. Consider the life of Angela Merkel, former Chancellor of Germany. She became one of the most respected leaders in the world not through loud speeches, but through habits of calm analysis, careful listening, and consistent reflection. Her thought patterns of measured judgment were not accidental. They were built on daily habits of discipline and focus. Another example is Martin Luther King Jr. His habit of reflecting on scripture, journaling his thoughts, and envisioning a better future created strong positive loops that fueled his courage in the face of adversity. His famous speech, I Have a Dream, wasn't just a moment of inspiration. It was the product of deeply ingrained thought habits cultivated over years. What about you? Think for a moment about your habits. What do you do when you wake up? How do you react when stress hits? Do your daily actions reinforce positive or negative thought loops? Because here's the truth. Habits and thought patterns feed each other. Your thoughts influence your habits, and your habits reinforce your thoughts. Change one, and you begin to change the other. Let's make this real. Over the next 3 days, I want you to observe your dominant thought loops. Carry a small notebook or use your phone. Every time you notice a recurring thought, positive or negative, write it down. At the end of the day, review them. Which thoughts uplifted you? Which thoughts drained you? How many of them repeated themselves? Once you see your patterns, you gain power over them. Awareness is the first step to change. There's a powerful quote from James Allen's classic book As a Man Thinketh, 1903. The soul attracts that which it secretly harbors, that which it loves, and also that which it fears. This reminds us that the thoughts you repeatedly entertain, whether hopeful or fearful, become the life you end up living. Key takeaways for you. Your brain builds loops through repeated thoughts. Neurons that fire together, wire together. Positive thought cycles create confidence and growth, while negative cycles reinforce doubt and failure. Habits and thought patterns feed each other. Your routines shape your mind, and your mind shapes your routines. Awareness of your thought patterns is the first step toward mastery. You can rewire your brain by intentionally practicing positive thoughts and building supportive habits. So, as we close this chapter, I want you to ask yourself, which loops am I feeding daily? The loops of growth or the loops of limitation? Remember, your future doesn't just depend on what you do. It depends on how you think, again and again, every single day. If this lesson resonated with you, don't keep it to yourself. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe so you won't miss the upcoming chapters in this audiobook series. Together, let's master the art of critical thinking and build the life you truly deserve. Now, let's move forward to the next chapter. Chapter 3, Spotting Cognitive Biases. Let me ask you something. Do you ever wonder why smart people still make poor decisions? Why even highly educated, experienced, and intelligent leaders sometimes take the wrong path, only to regret it later? The truth is, intelligence alone doesn't protect us from mistakes. What often misguides us are not the facts in front of us, but the invisible filters in our own minds, what psychologists call cognitive biases. Biases are like tinted glasses. When you wear them, you may not realize it, but everything you see is colored and distorted. You think you're seeing reality clearly, but in truth, your perception is being shaped by hidden shortcuts your brain has taken. And here's the secret. Every single one of us carries these biases. It doesn't matter if you are a student, a business owner, a parent, or even a world leader. Now let's explore 3 of the most common and powerful biases: confirmation bias, anchoring, and availability heuristic. Confirmation bias, seeing only what we want to see. Confirmation bias is the tendency to look for information that supports what we already believe, while ignoring or dismissing evidence that challenges it. Imagine this. You're convinced a certain investment is a sure win. So you read articles, watch videos, and talk to people. Yet your mind filters out anything negative. If someone warns you about risks, you brush it aside. If another person agrees with you, you hold on to their words tightly. That's confirmation bias at work. One powerful example is the story of a famous military leader who underestimated an opponent because he believed his nation's army was unbeatable. Despite intelligence reports warning of danger, he trusted only the voices that echoed his belief. History shows us how this bias led to disastrous outcomes, with lives lost and wars prolonged. Not because of a lack of intelligence, but because of selective listening. Author Daniel Kahneman, in his book Thinking, Fast and Slow, writes, "We can be blind to the obvious, and we are also blind to our blindness." Confirmation bias blinds us twice. First by hiding the truth, and second by convincing us we're seeing clearly. So how do you catch yourself in this trap? Start by asking, am I only looking for evidence that agrees with me? What would I find if I actively searched for the opposite view? Anchoring, the first number sticks. The second bias is called anchoring. This happens when we rely too heavily on the first piece of information we receive, even if it's irrelevant or misleading. Think of when you're bargaining at a market. The seller names a high price. Suddenly, every counteroffer you make revolves around that starting point. The first number, whether fair or not, anchors your entire judgment. One well-known example comes from the world of diplomacy. A past world leader walked into peace talks with a figure already fixed in his mind. That number, though arbitrary, shaped the entire negotiation process. His counterpart was able to use that anchor to steer the talks in their favor. The outcome wasn't purely logical. It was heavily influenced by the psychological weight of the very first number. Anchoring can affect everyday life, too. A job applicant might undervalue their worth if the first salary mentioned is low. A shopper might think a product is cheap just because it's marked 50% off, without realizing the original price was inflated. To catch anchoring, train yourself to pause and ask, Am I making this decision based only on the first number or idea I saw? What if I completely ignored it? Would I still make the same choice? Availability heuristic. What's easy to remember feels true. The third bias is the availability heuristic. This is when we judge something as more common or likely just because it's easy to recall. For example, after hearing constant news about plane crashes, some people become afraid to fly, even though statistically flying is far safer than driving. The vividness of recent stories makes the risk feel larger than it actually is. This bias has even shaped political decisions. There was once a world leader who focused heavily on a single type of threat because it had recently dominated the news, while ignoring more dangerous long-term risks. His choices looked decisive at the moment, but in hindsight, history shows how focusing only on what was available in memory left his nation vulnerable to bigger dangers. Think about your own life. Do you ever assume that because you saw a few stories about crime, the world is unsafe everywhere? Or because a friend failed at a business, you believe entrepreneurship is too risky? That's availability bias shaping your perspective. To guard against it, ask yourself, am I judging this situation only because it's fresh in my memory, or do I have real evidence to back it up? Pulling it all together. So, we've explored three major biases. Confirmation bias, the filter that makes us hear only what we want to hear. Anchoring, the weight of the first number or idea. Availability heuristic, the trap of mistaking vivid memories for actual probability. Here's the truth. You can't fully eliminate these biases because they're part of how the human brain works. But you can catch yourself in the act. Think of it like driving a car. You can't remove traffic altogether, but you can become a better driver by staying alert. Great thinkers and leaders throughout history learned this skill. They practiced humility by questioning their own judgments. They surrounded themselves with people who dared to disagree with them. They reminded themselves to slow down before making big decisions. And most importantly, they admitted they could be wrong. Key takeaways for you. Biases distort reality. They are not flaws of intelligence, but natural shortcuts of the brain. Confirmation bias makes us seek agreement, not truth. Fight it by looking for disconfirming evidence. Anchoring ties us to the first number or idea. Break free by resetting and considering alternatives. Availability heuristic makes recent or vivid events feel more important than they are. Challenge it with data, not just memory. Awareness is the first step. You may not avoid every bias, but the moment you recognize one, you gain power over it. Before we wrap up, remember this. Mastering your thought patterns is not about never making mistakes. It's about catching the invisible forces that quietly push your decisions and choosing more wisely in the moment. If you found this chapter valuable, I encourage you to take a second, like this video, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter in this journey. The more people who learn to think critically, the better our world becomes. So, are you ready to spot your own biases in action? Because once you see them, you'll never see your thoughts the same way again. Chapter 4: Breaking Mental Shortcuts. Let me ask you a question. How many times today did you act on autopilot? Maybe you reached for your phone without thinking. Maybe you drove the same route you always do without noticing the road. Or maybe you replied to a message with a quick answer, only to realize later that you misunderstood the point. This is what psychologists call mental shortcuts, or heuristics. They are fast, automatic patterns of thought your brain uses to save time and energy. In some cases, shortcuts are helpful. They allow you to make quick decisions, like knowing to stop at a red light or avoiding something dangerous. But here's the problem. When we rely too much on these shortcuts, they lead us into mistakes, poor judgments, and missed opportunities. Think of it this way. Autopilot is safe for flying a plane when the skies are clear. But what happens when a storm rolls in? That's when the pilot must take manual control. In the same way, autopilot thinking can work for simple decisions, but when life gets complicated, you need to slow down and steer your thoughts with clarity. How autopilot thinking leads to mistakes. History is full of examples where leaders, businesses, and even ordinary people made costly errors because they trusted mental shortcuts. One well-known story is that of John F. Kennedy during the Bay of Pigs invasion. Surrounded by advisors, Kennedy initially went along with the group's consensus, without deeply questioning the assumptions. It was a classic case of groupthink, a mental shortcut where the brain chooses harmony and speed over critical analysis. The result? A failed mission that he later admitted was one of his biggest mistakes. Kennedy learned from this, and when faced with the Cuban Missile Crisis, he slowed down, encouraged debate, and considered multiple perspectives. That shift in approach helped him avoid nuclear war. This shows us something powerful. Autopilot thinking loves quick answers, but quick answers are not always the right ones. Even in our personal lives, autopilot can lead to errors. Have you ever judged someone within seconds of meeting them, only to discover later that you were wrong? That's the brain relying on stereotypes, a shortcut. Or maybe you bought something expensive impulsively, convinced you needed it, and then regretted it a week later. That's autopilot again, pulling the strings. Slowing down to think with clarity. The antidote to mental shortcuts is slowing down. In his book Thinking, Fast and Slow, Nobel Prize winner Daniel Kahneman explains that the mind has two systems. System 1 is fast, automatic, and emotional. System 2 is slow, deliberate, and logical. Most of the time, System 1 is running the show. It's quick, it saves energy, and it feels easy. But when the stakes are high, you need to engage System 2. That means asking deeper questions, looking at evidence, and resisting the urge to jump to conclusions. One example comes from Abraham Lincoln. Known for his patience, Lincoln often carried letters in his pocket, angry responses he wrote to people who offended or criticized him. But he rarely sent them. Instead, he gave himself time to reflect, to let emotions settle before making decisions. That practice of slowing down allowed him to lead with wisdom during one of the most divided times in history. So here's the lesson. Clarity doesn't come from speed, it comes from space. When you pause, you create the distance needed to see situations for what they really are. Simple exercises to pause before reacting. Now let's get practical. How do you break free from autopilot? Here are 3 simple exercises. The 3-breath rule. Before reacting to any situation, whether it's an email, a disagreement, or an important choice, take 3 slow breaths. This interrupts autopilot and gives your brain a chance to shift into clarity mode. Ask 2 questions. When faced with a decision, ask, what assumption am I making? And what evidence do I really have? This small habit forces your mind to check itself before moving forward. Delay the reply. If something triggers you, delay your response. Just like Lincoln's letters, write your first reaction down, but don't send it immediately. Revisit it later with a calmer mind. These exercises may sound simple, but they are powerful. They create a mental speed bump that forces you to slow down, reconsider, and act with intention instead of impulse. Think of a business leader facing a sudden crisis. The easy shortcut would be to cut costs quickly, fire employees, or shut down projects without analysis. But the leaders who stand out are the ones who pause, gather data, consult others, and then act strategically. For instance, Angela Merkel, former Chancellor of Germany, was known for her deliberate decision-making style. She was often criticized for being too slow. But her ability to pause, analyze, and resist shortcuts earned her the nickname, the crisis manager. Her calm, methodical approach proved effective in guiding her country through turbulent times. Her story teaches us this. Slowing down is not weakness, it's strength. It allows you to see beyond the surface and make decisions that stand the test of time. Key takeaways for you. Autopilot thinking saves energy, but leads to mistakes in complex situations. Mental shortcuts often cause us to misjudge people, rush decisions, or follow the crowd. By slowing down and engaging deeper thinking, you can see situations more clearly. Simple practices like breathing, questioning assumptions, and delaying reactions can break the cycle of autopilot. Leaders like Kennedy, Lincoln, and Merkel show us the value of pausing before making life-altering decisions. Remember, the fastest decision is not always the smartest. Sometimes wisdom comes in the pause. So, I'll leave you with this question. What part of your life right now is running on autopilot? And how different could things be if you paused, questioned, and chose with clarity? If this chapter spoke to you, make sure to like this audiobook, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe to this channel so you never miss the next chapter in your journey to mastering critical thinking. Let's continue building the habit of thinking deeply, because the more you master your thoughts, the more you master your life. Chapter 5. The Role of Emotions in Thinking. Have you ever made a decision in the heat of the moment, only to regret it later? Maybe you bought something expensive because you were excited, or you said something harsh because you were angry. Then, when the emotions faded, you look back and thought, why did I do that? This is the power of emotions in decision-making. Emotions are not separate from our thoughts. They are woven into them. Every choice you make, every path you take, is influenced by how you feel at that moment. And if you don't understand this relationship, your emotions can end up controlling your life instead of guiding it. Let's dive deeper. How emotions influence decisions. Imagine a world leader standing before millions of people, about to make a life-changing decision for their nation. Logic alone is not enough. There is pressure, fear, hope, and even pride swirling inside. One such leader was Abraham Lincoln. During his presidency, he was faced with one of the most difficult times in history, civil conflict tearing his country apart. Lincoln once admitted that he often felt deep sadness and despair, yet he also relied on empathy and compassion to guide his choices. His emotions didn't weaken him. They made him human, and they helped him connect with the people he was leading. This shows us something important. Emotions are not enemies of rational thought. In fact, research in psychology has proven that people who lose access to emotional centers in their brain struggle to make even the simplest decisions. Why? Because emotions give weight to choices. They help us know what matters and what doesn't. Think of it this way. Logic tells you what you can do, but emotion tells you why you should do it. Balancing logic with feelings. Now here's the challenge. When we let emotions take over completely, our decisions can become reckless. Imagine being angry during a meeting and walking out, burning bridges you spent years building. Or making an investment because of excitement, only to realize later you ignored the facts. Balancing logic with feelings is like holding the reins of a horse. The horse, your emotions, is powerful. It can run fast and take you places. But without reins, your logic, it can run wild and throw you off. Take the example of Angela Merkel, former Chancellor of Germany. Known for her calm, logical style, she often faced global crises with a steady hand. But if you study her carefully, you'll see that her leadership wasn't cold or robotic. She showed empathy in her speeches, especially during times of uncertainty. People trusted her because she combined clear reasoning with emotional understanding. This balance is what you and I need to practice every day. You don't have to suppress your emotions, and you don't have to worship them either. Instead, let logic and emotion work together like partners. Techniques for emotional awareness. So, how do you gain control over your emotions instead of being controlled by them? Here are some practical techniques. Pause before reacting. When you feel a strong emotion rising, anger, fear, excitement, pause for a few seconds before making a decision. This simple act gives your logical brain time to catch up. Think of it as pressing the Save Draft button instead of Send. Name the emotion. Psychologists say that labeling your emotions reduces their intensity. If you feel angry, say to yourself, I am feeling anger right now. If you feel anxious, say, this is anxiety. Naming emotions gives you distance, like stepping outside the storm to watch it instead of being caught in it. Ask the balancing question. Whenever you face a decision, ask, what do my emotions say, and what does the evidence say? This forces you to check both sides. For example, if you want to quit your job because you're frustrated, emotion says leave. But evidence might say, wait, you have no backup plan yet. Balancing both gives you wisdom. Practice mindful reflection. Every evening, reflect. What emotion guided most of my decisions today? Was it helpful or harmful? Over time, you'll start noticing patterns, and awareness is the first step to mastery. Use stories, not just facts. If you're trying to influence others, remember that emotions move people more than raw logic. A quote from Daniel Kahneman's book Thinking, Fast and Slow reminds us, emotions are the dominant driver of most choices. People rarely choose based only on facts. This doesn't mean abandon facts. It means connect facts with feelings to make them powerful. Consider the story of Jacinda Ardern, former Prime Minister of New Zealand. After a national tragedy, she didn't just give logical explanations. She spoke with compassion, wore symbols of empathy, and connected emotionally with her people. Her response was praised worldwide because it showed how emotions, when balanced with clear leadership, can bring healing and unity. She could have responded only with policies and procedures, but by showing genuine emotion, she gave people both guidance and comfort. This is the lesson. Logic makes people understand you, but emotions make people follow you. Key takeaways for you. Emotions and logic are not enemies. They are partners in decision-making. Emotions influence every choice, whether you realize it or not. Balancing emotion with evidence is the secret to wise decisions. Use techniques like pausing, labeling emotions, and reflection to gain awareness. Leaders and everyday people alike succeed when they connect logic with empathy. So I'll leave you with a question. When you look at your own life, are your emotions guiding you toward growth or dragging you into mistakes? The power is in your hands. Learn to balance your feelings with clear reasoning, and you'll make decisions that not only make sense but also feel right. Remember, your thoughts shape your world, but your emotions color it. Master both, and you master your life. And before we move to the next chapter, if you found this lesson valuable, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so more people can join us on this journey of mastering critical thinking for personal improvement. Chapter 6, Questioning Your Assumptions. Let me start by asking you something very personal. How often do you stop to question the things you believe about yourself and the world around you? Think about it. Most of the time, we carry beliefs that we never chose consciously. Some were passed down by our parents. Some were shaped by our culture, religion, or education. Some came from painful experiences, rejections, or failures we once faced. Over time, these beliefs become assumptions, quiet rules that shape how we think, how we act, and even what we believe is possible for our lives. But here's the real danger. Many of these hidden beliefs are not true, and yet they still control us. How hidden beliefs shape your thinking. Assumptions act like invisible lenses through which we see the world. If your lens is cloudy, your vision is cloudy. If your lens is cracked, then reality looks distorted. For example, if you assume that you are not good with money, you will unconsciously avoid opportunities to learn about financial growth. If you assume that people cannot be trusted, you will sabotage relationships before they even begin. If you assume, I am not smart enough, you'll never give yourself the chance to test your true potential. History is filled with examples of leaders who challenged assumptions and changed the world. Let's look at Abraham Lincoln. When he was young, people assumed that a poor boy from a log cabin could never become president. Society assumed leadership was reserved for the elite, for the wealthy, for those born with privilege. But Lincoln challenged that assumption, not just for himself, but for an entire generation. He believed in growth through learning, resilience, and moral clarity. By questioning the limitations society placed on him, he proved that humble beginnings do not define ultimate destiny. Your hidden beliefs are powerful. If you don't examine them, they will quietly write the story of your life, without your permission. Identifying limiting beliefs. So, how do we uncover these hidden beliefs? The first step is awareness. Ask yourself, what do I believe about myself that might not be true? Where did this belief come from? Is it helping me, or is it holding me back? Let me give you an example. Marie Curie, the great scientist who pioneered research on radioactivity, lived in a time when many assumed women could not excel in science. That was the cultural assumption. If she had accepted it, she would have never made her discoveries. But she identified that belief as limiting, false, and harmful. Instead of surrendering to it, she reframed it. Why not me? Her courage to challenge that assumption changed the course of science and opened doors for countless women after her. Now think about your own life. What assumptions have you accepted without question? Maybe you believe you're too old to start something new. Maybe you believe you need approval before making decisions. Maybe you believe success is only for other people. These are all limiting beliefs, and until you shine light on them, they control you from the shadows. Reframing and challenging assumptions. The second step is reframing. Once you identify a limiting belief, don't just reject it, replace it with something empowering. For instance, if you believe, "I always fail at relationships," challenge that assumption by asking, "What lessons have I learned from past relationships that will help me build better ones in the future?" If you assume, "I'll never succeed because I didn't go to the best school," reframe it as, "My growth depends on my effort, discipline, and creativity, not on my school's name." Here's an important truth. Assumptions lose their power the moment you question them deeply. The philosopher Epictetus once said in his book The Discourses, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." That means the story you attach to events, your interpretation, your assumption, is what defines your reality. Change the assumption, and you change the outcome. Let's take another leader as an example. Nelson Mandela's contemporary, Kwame Nkrumah, the first Prime Minister and President of Ghana. The assumption at the time was that colonized nations could not govern themselves successfully. Nkrumah challenged that belief, not only by leading his country to independence, but also by inspiring other African nations to do the same. He reframed the assumption of weakness into a vision of self-determination and strength. You too have that same power. Every assumption you question is a doorway to freedom. Action steps. Write down your repeating thoughts. Spend 1 week journaling what you often say to yourself. "I can't. I'm not good at this. They'll never accept me." Those are your assumptions speaking. Trace the origin. Ask yourself, where did this belief come from? Was it a parent, a teacher, a bad experience? Recognize it for what it is, a story, not a fact. Ask the empowering question. Instead of asking, "Why am I like this?" ask, "How can I grow from this?" That small shift turns an assumption into an opportunity. Reframe with new language. Replace "I can't" with "I am learning how." Replace "I'm not good enough" with "I am improving daily." Test your assumptions in action. Don't just think differently, act differently. If you assume you're bad at public speaking, volunteer for a small speaking opportunity. The moment you prove the assumption wrong, your confidence grows. Key takeaways for you. Hidden beliefs quietly shape how you see yourself and the world. Limiting beliefs come from past experiences, culture, or fear, but they are not permanent truths. Challenging assumptions allows you to break free and expand what's possible. Reframing turns negative beliefs into empowering ones. Action is the ultimate proof that your assumptions can be rewritten. Before we close, let me ask you, what is one assumption you've carried for years that you now realize is not true? Write it down. Question it. Replace it. Because your future will not be defined by old beliefs. It will be defined by the courage you have today to think differently. If this chapter has given you new insight, remember this. Someone else in the world is struggling with assumptions too. Sharing this message could be the spark they need. So don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. That way, you don't just grow personally, but you also help others on their journey to better thinking. Chapter 7, Thinking in Systems. Let me start with a question for you. When you face a challenge, do you usually focus only on what's right in front of you, or do you step back and look at the bigger picture? Most people get trapped in the details. They see the immediate problem, the urgent fire that needs to be put out, but they miss the larger system that created that problem in the first place. And that's where systems thinking becomes a game changer. Systems thinking is about stepping back, widening your lens, and seeing how all the pieces connect. It's about understanding cause and effect, not just in a straight line, but in loops, patterns, and relationships. Think of it like this. Instead of looking at one tree, you're looking at the entire forest and noticing how the soil, the rainfall, the sunlight, and even the smallest insects all play a role in the health of that forest. Now, let me bring this closer to you. Imagine you are constantly stressed at work. On the surface, the problem looks like too much work. But when you apply systems thinking, you might notice that the real cause is deeper. Maybe the workload feels overwhelming because there's poor communication in your team. Or maybe the tools you use are outdated, slowing everyone down. Or perhaps expectations are unclear, so tasks keep piling up unnecessarily. If you only try to work harder, you never solve the root issue. But by stepping back and looking at the system, communication, processes, clarity, you suddenly see where real change can happen. This is what makes systems thinking so powerful. It teaches you to look beyond symptoms and into root causes. One of the best examples of this comes from a world leader who rebuilt his nation from years of division and poverty. Lee Kuan Yew, the first Prime Minister of Singapore, once explained that progress didn't come by solving problems one by one, but by building systems, education, infrastructure, governance that work together. Instead of only focusing on immediate issues like unemployment or crime, he created systems that addressed the root causes, setting his country on a path to long-term prosperity. This is the essence of systems thinking. Problems don't exist in isolation. They are connected to other problems, and sometimes solving one issue without understanding the system creates new problems. Here's another example. Imagine a city decides to build more roads to solve traffic congestion. At first, it works. Cars move more freely. But soon, more people buy cars, more traffic fills the streets, and the city is back to square one. Sometimes even worse than before. This is what we call a feedback loop. Systems thinking helps us recognize these loops so we can design smarter solutions, like improving public transport or encouraging carpooling instead of just building more roads. One of the greatest thinkers on this subject, Peter Senge, in his classic book The Fifth Discipline, wrote, "Today's problems come from yesterday's solutions." And isn't that true? Sometimes the quick fixes we apply create long-term problems because we failed to see the bigger system at work. So how can you apply systems thinking in your personal life? Let's make it practical. First, step back from the immediate problem. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me right now?" ask, "What system am I part of that might be creating this pattern?" For example, if you find yourself always tired, don't just blame lack of sleep. Look at the whole system. Your daily habits, diet, screen time, stress levels, and even the way you manage your schedule. Second, look for cause and effect beyond the obvious. Systems thinking teaches us that causes are not always direct. Sometimes the effect you're seeing today comes from an action you took weeks, months, or even years ago. A poor decision with your finances today might not hurt you immediately, but over time it compounds into debt or missed opportunities. Similarly, investing in learning today may not bring instant results, but it creates a long-term system of growth. Third, pay attention to feedback loops. In life, feedback is everywhere. Sometimes it's positive feedback, which amplifies results, and sometimes it's negative feedback, which balances or limits results. For instance, think about your health. Exercising regularly creates a positive feedback loop. You feel more energetic, which motivates you to exercise more. On the other hand, skipping exercise creates a negative loop. You feel sluggish, so you avoid movement, and the cycle continues. By recognizing these loops, you can choose which cycles to break and which ones to strengthen. Let me share another story from leadership. Abraham Lincoln, during his presidency, faced an America deeply divided. Instead of focusing only on immediate issues, he thought in systems. He understood that lasting unity required not just ending a war, but also creating a framework where the values of freedom and governance could sustain future generations. His systemic view of leadership allowed him to make decisions that echoed far beyond his time in office. When you think in systems, You stop playing short-term games and start creating long-term solutions. And this doesn't just apply to leaders or governments, it applies to you. In your career, it means not just asking, how do I get promoted? But also, what skills, habits, and networks am I building that will support my growth for years? In your relationships, it's not just about fixing arguments. It's about building systems of trust, respect, and communication so arguments happen less often. Now, let's bring this into an exercise. I want you to pick one problem in your life right now. Write it down. Then, instead of rushing to solve it, ask yourself, what system is this problem a part of? What are the hidden causes feeding this problem? What feedback loops are keeping it alive? If I change one part of the system, how might it affect the rest? When you answer these questions, you'll notice something amazing. Problems that once seemed overwhelming start to look solvable, not with a quick fix, but with smart, systemic changes. Remember, the goal is not perfection. Systems thinking is about progress. When you adjust the system, even in small ways, you create ripples that bring long-lasting improvement. Key takeaways for you. Systems thinking means seeing the bigger picture, not just the immediate problem. Problems are often connected. Look for root causes instead of quick fixes. Feedback loops drive many patterns in life. Learn to identify and shape them. Apply systems thinking to your health, work, relationships, and decision-making. The smartest solutions are not short-term patches, but long-term systemic changes. And before we move on, I want to leave you with this powerful thought. If you want to change your life, don't just change individual habits. Change the system that creates those habits. If you're finding this audiobook helpful so far, make sure to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss the rest of the chapters. Your support helps us reach more people who are ready to improve their thinking and their lives. Now, let's continue our journey into mastering critical thinking. Chapter 8. Developing Analytical Thinking. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever been faced with a problem so overwhelming that you didn't even know where to begin? Maybe it was a decision about your career, your finances, or even a relationship. You probably replayed the situation over and over in your head, searching for clarity, but instead, the more you thought about it, the more confused you became. That's where analytical thinking comes in. Analytical thinking is the ability to break down complex issues into smaller, manageable parts, examine them carefully, and put the pieces back together in a way that leads to clarity and better decisions. It's not just for scientists, business leaders, or politicians. It's for anyone who wants to make smarter choices in life. Think of it like this. When you face a big problem, your brain can feel like it's staring at a tangled ball of string. Analytical thinking helps you patiently unravel the knots, one thread at a time, until the whole picture makes sense. Breaking down complex issues. One of the greatest skills you can learn is the art of simplification, taking something complex and making it understandable. Abraham Lincoln once said, "Give me 6 hours to chop down a tree, and I will spend the first 4 sharpening the axe." What he meant was that preparation and careful thought are more powerful than rushing into action. When Lincoln faced the enormous challenge of leading his country through a civil war, he didn't look at the situation as one massive, impossible problem. Instead, he broke it down into questions. What are the root causes of this conflict? What are the needs of the people on each side? What are the possible outcomes of each decision? By breaking the problem into smaller parts, he was able to address each issue systematically. That's what analytical thinking looks like in action. Now imagine applying that to your own life. Instead of saying, "I hate my job, I need to quit," you can ask, "What exactly do I dislike about my job? Is it the work itself, the people, or the lack of growth? What options do I realistically have?" This step-by-step breakdown gives you clarity instead of chaos. The difference between analysis and overthinking. But let's be honest, sometimes thinking too much feels like we're doing something productive, when in reality we're just stuck. This is where you must learn the difference between analysis and overthinking. Analysis is purposeful. It's about asking clear questions, seeking evidence, and coming to a conclusion. Overthinking, on the other hand, is circular. You keep replaying the same scenario without moving closer to a solution. Think of Angela Merkel, former Chancellor of Germany. She was known as the Queen of Analysis because she took time to carefully weigh options, consider facts, and listen to experts. But what made her effective wasn't just analysis. It was that she eventually made a decision and moved forward. Overthinking freezes you in place. Analysis frees you to act with confidence. The difference is that one ends with a decision, the other ends with exhaustion. Now let's talk about tools you can use in your daily life to sharpen this skill. 1. Mind maps. A mind map is a simple visual tool where you place your main problem in the center of a page, then draw branches to represent possible causes, effects, or solutions. For example, if your main problem is financial stress, your branches could be spending habits, income, unexpected expenses, and savings. Once you see the structure, you can tackle each branch instead of feeling overwhelmed by the whole tree. 2. Pros and cons lists. This tool is as old as time but still powerful. When Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, wrote his famous Meditations, he often weighed choices by considering both their benefits and their costs. A simple pros and cons list helps you lay out your options side by side, stripping away emotions and giving you a clearer view. 3. Decision trees. A decision tree is like a map of possibilities. Start with your main choice at the top. Say, should I take this new job? Then branch out with possible outcomes. More money, longer commute, better growth opportunities, less time with family. Under each outcome, you add potential consequences. This tree allows you to see not just the decision itself, but the ripple effects it might create. Each of these tools forces you to slow down, break the problem into parts, and think systematically. Consider Nelson Mandela's contemporary, Julius Nyerere of Tanzania, who faced the enormous task of unifying more than 100 different ethnic groups after independence. Instead of trying to enforce unity by force, he broke the problem into smaller questions. What language can unite us? What values can we share? His decision to promote Swahili as a national language was a practical analytical solution to a deeply complex problem. Another example is Abraham Lincoln's use of a team of rivals. He surrounded himself with people who had different opinions, so he could weigh all sides of an issue before making a choice. This analytical approach made him one of the most effective leaders in history. Daniel Kahneman, Nobel Prize winner and author of Thinking, Fast and Slow, wrote, "Nothing in life is as important as you think it is while you are thinking about it." This quote reminds us that when you're trapped in overthinking, every problem feels like life or death. Analytical thinking pulls you out of that trap, showing you the bigger picture. Key takeaways for you. Break it down. Complex problems are solved by dividing them into smaller, clearer questions. Distinguish thinking from overthinking. Analysis leads to action. Overthinking leads to paralysis. Use tools, mind maps, pros/cons lists, and decision trees are simple but powerful. Learn from leaders. Great leaders like Abraham Lincoln, Angela Merkel, and Julius Nyerere used analysis to turn complexity into clarity. Decide and act. True analysis ends with a decision, not endless questioning. Think about one area of your life right now where you feel stuck. Maybe it's your finances, your health, or your relationships. Instead of replaying the problem in your mind, I challenge you. Grab a pen and paper and try one of the tools we discussed. Make a mind map, create a pros and cons list, or sketch a decision tree. You'll be amazed at how quickly clarity starts to form. Remember, your thoughts are powerful, but only if you train them with discipline. Analytical thinking is not about being the smartest person in the room. It's about being the clearest thinker in the room. And clarity, more than intelligence, is what leads to better choices and a better life. If you found this chapter valuable, don't keep it to yourself. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss the next chapter of this audiobook. And remember, when you sharpen your mind, you sharpen your life. Chapter 9, Creative Thinking Meets Critical Thinking. Let me ask you a question. When you hear the phrase critical thinking, what comes to mind? Most people picture logic. They imagine analysis, weighing pros and cons, questioning assumptions, or breaking down a problem into neat little pieces. And yes, critical thinking is all of those things. But here's the surprising truth. Critical thinking is not complete without creativity. You see, logic helps you examine what already exists. Creativity helps you imagine what could exist. Critical thinking is about clarity, but creativity is about possibility. And when you combine them, you unlock the ability to solve problems in ways most people never even consider. Think about it. Some of the greatest breakthroughs in history didn't come from logic alone. They came from someone who dared to look at a problem from a different angle. Someone who asked, what if there's another way? This is where the concept of lateral thinking comes in. Coined by Edward de Bono in his book Lateral Thinking, it's the art of approaching problems from the side instead of head-on. Instead of pushing harder against the same wall, lateral thinkers look for a window, a back door, or maybe even ask, do we need the wall at all? Let me give you an example. Imagine a world leader standing before a nation divided by conflict. Logic says, strengthen the military, enforce strict laws, and push for control. But creativity asks, what if instead of fighting harder, we fought smarter? What if the solution isn't confrontation, but conversation? Leaders like Abraham Lincoln in history demonstrated this beautifully. Instead of focusing only on winning the Civil War through battles, he envisioned the bigger picture: reconciliation, unity, and the rebuilding of a broken nation. His creative use of language, empathy, and vision alongside logical strategy transformed not just the outcome of a war, but the future of a people. Here's another example: Queen Elizabeth I of England. In a time when female rulers were underestimated, she faced endless threats. Logic might have pushed her to marry quickly to secure alliances. But creativity guided her differently. She crafted a powerful narrative of herself as the Virgin Queen, symbolically wedded to her nation. That combination of imagination and reasoning allowed her to maintain independence while still securing loyalty and stability. That's creative critical thinking in action. Now you might be thinking, but I'm not leading a nation, I'm just trying to improve my own life. And that's exactly the point. Creative critical thinking isn't reserved for leaders, inventors, or entrepreneurs. It's for you when you face everyday challenges. Let me make this real for you. Imagine you're struggling financially. Critical thinking says, spend less, budget wisely, maybe get another job. That's good, solid logic. But creativity asks, what if I find a skill I already have that I can use differently? What if instead of only cutting costs, I create new income streams? See the shift? Logic solves the immediate problem. Creativity opens new opportunities. Or think about relationships. Logic says, if someone offends me, I should explain my feelings or distance myself. But creativity says, what if I try humor to break the tension? What if I try silence, or a gesture of kindness instead of words? That's how conflicts sometimes melt away. Not because you followed the obvious route, but because you thought outside of it. Here's the danger most people fall into. They separate logic and imagination, as though one belongs to scientists and the other to artists. But in truth, the best scientists are creative, and the best artists are critical thinkers. The painter needs discipline to master technique, just as the engineer needs creativity to design something new. So how do you combine imagination with reasoning in your own life? Let's break it down into 3 simple steps. Step 1, ask what if. Whenever you face a problem, don't just ask, what should I do? Ask, what if I did it differently? What if I reversed the order? What if I removed the problem entirely? What if is the spark that ignites creativity. Step 2, challenge the obvious. The first solution that comes to your mind is often the most common. But is it the best? Train yourself to pause. Write down 3 alternatives before you act. Even if the first idea is good, the third or fourth might be brilliant. Step 3, balance dreams with data. This is where critical thinking protects creativity from becoming fantasy. Your imagination opens the door, but reasoning helps you test whether the idea can stand. Ask, is this realistic? What evidence supports it? How can I test it on a small scale before going all in? Let's connect this back to a real-world example. Take Lee Kuan Yew, the founding Prime Minister of Singapore. His nation was small, resource-poor, and surrounded by stronger neighbors. Logic said, Singapore had little chance of thriving. But creativity saw something different. He asked, what if we become a hub, not through size but through efficiency and trust? He combined that creative vision with disciplined planning, turning a vulnerable island into a global powerhouse. That's the marriage of imagination and reasoning. Here's a quote I want you to remember from Edward de Bono's book Lateral Thinking. You cannot dig a hole in a different place by digging the same hole deeper. Think about that. Many people believe that working harder on the same path will eventually lead to success. But sometimes success comes not from digging deeper, but from moving sideways, from daring to look at things differently. So let me coach you directly here. The next time you're stuck, whether it's in your work, your relationships, or your personal growth, pause and ask yourself, am I only using logic, or am I also allowing room for creativity? If you're only reasoning, you may be missing possibilities. If you're only dreaming, you may be missing reality. But when you blend the two, you become unstoppable. Key takeaways for you. Critical thinking is not complete without creativity. Logic examines what exists. Creativity imagines what could exist. Lateral thinking means approaching problems from new angles instead of pushing harder at the same wall. World leaders like Abraham Lincoln, Queen Elizabeth I, and Lee Kuan Yew succeeded because they combined vision with discipline. In your life, practice by asking what if, challenging the obvious and balancing dreams with data. Remember, the best solutions are born when imagination and reasoning work hand in hand. Now I want to challenge you. Pick one area of your life right now where you feel stuck. Don't overthink it, just the first thing that comes to mind. Tonight, before you sleep, write down 3 different what-if questions about it. Tomorrow, review your answers and ask yourself, which of these ideas can I test, even in a small way? That's how you begin to practice creative critical thinking. And before we move to the next chapter, let me remind you, if you're finding value in this audiobook, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Not only does it help this channel grow, but it also allows more people around the world to learn these skills and improve their lives just like you. Because mastering your thoughts is the first step to mastering your future. Chapter 10: The Power of Evidence-Based Thinking. Let me begin with a simple question. How many times in your life have you believed something, only to later discover that it wasn't true? Maybe it was a piece of advice you heard growing up, a rumor that spread quickly, or even a decision you made based on what felt right in the moment. Later, the truth revealed itself, and you wondered, how did I not see it earlier? This is the challenge of human thinking. We often confuse opinions for facts, emotions for truth, and personal experiences for universal laws. But if you want to master critical thinking, you must learn to build your decisions on evidence, not assumption. That is the heart of evidence-based thinking. Separating fact from opinion. Here's the first step: learning to separate fact from opinion. A fact is something that can be proven or measured. An opinion, on the other hand, is a personal belief shaped by perspective, culture, or feeling. Let's take a relatable example. Imagine someone says, "Morning exercise is the best way to stay healthy." That sounds convincing. But is it a fact or an opinion? The fact is that exercise improves health. The opinion is that mornings are the best time. It might be true for one person, but not for another. Too often, we let opinions, ours or others, guide our choices as if they were hard truths. Evidence-based thinking challenges you to stop and ask, what do I know for sure, and what do I only believe? One great example of a leader who embodied this principle is Angela Merkel, former Chancellor of Germany. She was trained as a scientist before entering politics. Known for her calm, rational style, she often delayed making major decisions until she had examined the data carefully. People sometimes criticized her for being slow, but her evidence-driven approach helped her guide her country through crises with stability. Her career shows us that sometimes wisdom lies not in speed, but in accuracy. Using data to support your reasoning. Now, let's talk about using data to strengthen your reasoning. Opinions can be powerful, but without evidence, they collapse under pressure. Data acts as the foundation that holds up your ideas. Imagine a business owner who wants to expand. He feels like his customers love a certain product, but when he checks the sales numbers, he finds that another product is actually driving most of the growth. If he had relied only on feeling, he would have made a costly mistake. The evidence pointed him toward the smarter decision. One of the most famous examples of this comes from Abraham Lincoln during his presidency. Known as a master communicator, Lincoln didn't just rely on passion when making arguments. He often backed his reasoning with historical examples, legal evidence, and logical structure. His speeches, like the Gettysburg Address, remain powerful not only because of emotion, but also because of the evidence and clarity behind them. Lincoln understood that a strong argument must stand on more than just conviction. It must stand on proof. And here's something important. Using evidence doesn't mean you ignore intuition. It means you test your intuition against reality. Think of it like this: your intuition is the spark, but evidence is the fuel. Without fuel, the fire won't last. Avoiding misinformation traps. Now let's face the biggest challenge of our time: misinformation. We live in an age where news spreads faster than ever. Social media, headlines, and word of mouth bombard us with information every day. But not everything you hear or read is true. So how do you protect yourself? Here are a few strategies. Check the source. Ask yourself, where did this information come from? Is it a reliable expert, or just someone's opinion repeated online? Look for evidence. Is there data, research, or historical proof supporting the claim? Or is it based on emotions and anecdotes? Compare multiple viewpoints. Don't settle for one voice. Look at different sources. Truth often emerges when you weigh various perspectives. A powerful example here is Jacinda Ardern, the former Prime Minister of New Zealand. During times of crisis, she often urged citizens to rely on verified information rather than rumors. She modeled transparency by backing her decisions with clear evidence, data, and explanations, reducing fear and confusion. Her leadership showed how evidence-based thinking builds trust in uncertain times. There's a powerful line from Carl Sagan's book, The Demon-Haunted World: "Science as a candle in the dark." He wrote, "Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence." This quote is a reminder that the bigger or stranger a claim sounds, the stronger the proof should be before we accept it as truth. It teaches us to raise our standards of evidence, especially when making important decisions. Now, let's bring this back to you. Ask yourself, when was the last time you made a decision based only on opinion? Did you check for facts? Do you pause to verify information, or do you sometimes trust the loudest voice? Here's an exercise you can try today. Take one belief you hold strongly about work, health, or relationships and ask, what evidence do I really have for this belief? Write it down. If you can't find strong proof, challenge yourself to research and see what's true. This one habit alone can change your entire thinking pattern. Key takeaways for you. Facts are different from opinions. Learn to separate the two in your daily life. Evidence strengthens reasoning. Don't just rely on feelings. Look for data. Misinformation is everywhere. Protect yourself by questioning sources, demanding proof, and seeking multiple perspectives. Evidence-based thinking is not just for leaders. It's for everyone who wants to make wiser, stronger, more confident choices. So, I'll ask you directly, are you ready to raise the standard of your thinking by demanding evidence, not just opinions? Are you ready to build a stronger mind, one that can cut through misinformation and stand firmly on truth? If this chapter gave you value, make sure to like this audiobook, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next chapter in this journey of mastering critical thinking. Because the more we learn to think with evidence, the more we build a life built on clarity, confidence, and truth. Chapter 11: Decision Making with Clarity. Imagine this. You're standing at a crossroads in life. Two paths stretch before you. One feels safe, predictable, familiar. The other feels risky, uncertain, but full of potential. Which do you choose? And more importantly, how do you choose? This is the heart of decision making. Every day, you are making choices, some small, some life-changing. From what to eat, to how to respond in a tense situation, to whether or not to take a leap of faith in your career, business, or relationship. And while some decisions may seem simple, others carry pressure, fear, and even doubt. The question is, how do you make better decisions when the stakes are high, when time is short, and when the weight feels heavy on your shoulders? Let's explore the art of decision making with clarity. Making better decisions under pressure. The first thing to understand is this. Pressure is not the enemy. Pressure can sharpen your focus if you know how to use it. Think of an athlete about to take the final shot of a game. Their heart is racing, the crowd is roaring, but they tune in, trust their training, and act with clarity. World leaders and influential thinkers have always faced pressure-filled moments. Take Abraham Lincoln, for example. During one of the darkest times in history, he had to make tough decisions that shaped the future. The pressure he faced wasn't just political, it was moral, social, and deeply personal. What gave him clarity wasn't the absence of stress, but his ability to slow down, gather facts, consider different perspectives, and then act with conviction. The same applies to you. When you're under pressure, clarity doesn't come from rushing. It comes from pausing, breathing, and separating emotion from fact. Pressure will always exist, but clarity is a choice. Practical models for clear decision-making. Now let's dive into practical tools you can use today. 1. The Audiobook. This model was first developed by U.S. Air Force Colonel John Boyd to help fighter pilots make quick yet effective decisions in fast-moving situations. ODA stands for Observe, Orient, Decide, Act. Observe, gather information. What is actually happening? Orient, analyze the situation and your options. Decide, choose a course of action. Act, implement and then quickly reassess. This loop is powerful because it's flexible. Life is constantly changing. By looping through this cycle, you avoid being stuck. You act, evaluate, and adjust. Imagine using ODA in your own life. You're offered a new opportunity. Instead of overthinking, you observe the facts, orient yourself to your values and goals, decide what feels right, and act, while staying open to adjust if needed. 2. The SWOT analysis. SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. It's often used in business strategy, but works perfectly in personal decisions. Strengths. What advantages or resources do you already have? Weaknesses. What gaps or risks might hold you back? Opportunities. What external chances could you leverage? Threats. What outside forces could stand in your way? For example, imagine deciding whether to relocate to a new city. By applying SWOT, you'd weigh your strengths, adaptability, financial readiness, weaknesses, leaving family behind, opportunities, career growth, fresh start, and threats, higher cost of living, uncertainty. Writing these down clears the fog. 3. Cost-benefit analysis. This is as straightforward as it sounds. List the potential benefits of a decision, then list the potential costs. Compare. The goal isn't perfection, it's perspective. Think of a leader like Angela Merkel, who guided her nation through multiple crises. Her approach was often grounded in weighing benefits versus costs, not only for today, but for generations to come. She understood that every decision carries trade-offs, and clarity comes when you're willing to face them honestly. Knowing when good enough is better than perfect. Here's a truth you may not like. Perfection is the enemy of progress. So many people stay frozen because they wait for the perfect time, the perfect answer, the perfect outcome. But life doesn't work like that. As the philosopher Voltaire once said, "Perfect is the enemy of the good." This quote reminds us that chasing perfection often leads to inaction. Sometimes, making a good decision today is far better than making the perfect decision months or years too late. Take Jacinda Ardern, former Prime Minister of New Zealand, as an example. She often had to make rapid, tough decisions in times of crisis. She didn't have the luxury of perfection. What mattered was timeliness, empathy, and clarity. Her leadership showed that sometimes the courage to act, even with incomplete information, is better than waiting endlessly. You too must learn this balance. If you've done your research, considered your values, and applied decision-making models, then at some point, you must choose. Trust yourself. Move forward. You can refine along the way. Key takeaways for you. Pressure can sharpen clarity. Don't fear it, manage it. Use decision-making models. Audiobook for quick, adaptive choices. SWOT analysis for structured thinking. Cost-benefit analysis for perspective. Don't chase perfection. Sometimes good enough is the decision that moves you forward. Leaders throughout history show us that clarity isn't about knowing everything. It's about balancing logic, values, and timely action. Every decision you make is shaping your future. Clarity isn't a gift, it's a skill you practice. Now I want to leave you with a question. What decision in your life have you been delaying because you're waiting for the perfect answer? Maybe today is the day you choose clarity over hesitation. If this chapter has helped you see decision-making in a new way, don't keep it to yourself. Like this video, share it with someone who might need guidance, and subscribe so you never miss the next chapter in this journey of mastering critical thinking. Because remember, your future isn't shaped by chance. It's shaped by the clarity of the decisions you make today. Chapter 12, Overcoming Mental Traps. Let me ask you a question. How many times have you delayed doing something important because you told yourself, "I'll do it tomorrow"? Or maybe you worked on something for hours but never finished it because it just wasn't perfect enough. Or perhaps you didn't even start at all because deep down you were afraid of failing. These are what we call mental traps. Invisible cages of the mind. They don't just steal your time, they steal your growth. And unless you learn how to break free from them, they will quietly shape your thought patterns and hold back your potential. Today, we'll talk about 3 of the most common traps: procrastination, perfectionism, and fear of failure. By the end of this session, you will not only understand how they affect you, but you'll also have practical, step-by-step methods to escape them. The trap of procrastination. Procrastination is often misunderstood. People think it means being lazy. But procrastination isn't laziness, it's avoidance. It's your brain choosing comfort over discomfort, even if that comfort is temporary. Think about it. You sit down to write, study, or start a project. Suddenly, your mind tells you, check your messages first. Get a snack. Watch one quick video. Before you know it, hours are gone. And the task? Still waiting. One powerful example comes from Abraham Lincoln. Before becoming one of the greatest leaders in history, he battled deep self-doubt and a tendency to postpone decisions out of fear of making mistakes. But Lincoln learned that delaying action often cost more than making the wrong choice. He trained himself to act swiftly when it mattered most, even under enormous pressure. His story reminds us that procrastination isn't defeated by waiting for the perfect time. It's defeated by taking action, even when you feel unready. A helpful method to fight procrastination is the 2-minute rule, popularized in the book Atomic Habits by James Clear. The idea is simple. If a task takes less than 2 minutes, do it immediately. If it's a bigger task, break it down until the first step takes just 2 minutes. This rewires your brain to associate starting with ease instead of dread. The trap of perfectionism. Now let's move to perfectionism. At first glance, perfectionism looks like a good thing. After all, who doesn't want to do their best? But perfectionism is not about excellence, it's about fear. The fear of criticism, the fear of being judged, the fear of not being good enough. This is why many perfectionists never finish projects. They polish, tweak, and revise endlessly, but they never release their work. And what's the result? Lost opportunities. Take the example of Margaret Thatcher, the former British Prime Minister. Whether people agreed with her politics or not, one thing is clear. She made bold decisions and stood firmly by them. She didn't wait until her policies were flawless before presenting them. She understood that leadership means making progress, not chasing perfection. Imagine if she had waited for every condition to be ideal. History would have been very different. To overcome perfectionism, you must learn the principle of progress over perfection. A practical way to do this is by using the 90% rule. Ask yourself, is this good enough to be 90% ready? If yes, move forward. Because the truth is, perfection doesn't exist. What matters is momentum. The trap of fear of failure. Finally, let's talk about fear of failure. This is the most powerful mental trap of them all. Fear of failure paralyzes people before they even begin. But here's the truth. Failure isn't the opposite of success, it's part of success. Every world leader, every innovator, every pioneer has failed. The difference is, they didn't let fear stop them from trying again. Consider the story of Nelson Mandela's contemporary in Africa, Julius Nyerere, the first president of Tanzania. His vision for unity and education was ambitious, but not all of his policies succeeded. Some failed, some faced resistance, and some needed to be changed over time. But instead of allowing fear of failure to silence him, he adjusted, he learned, and he kept moving forward. His persistence built the foundation for a united Tanzania. Psychologist Carol Dweck, in her book Mindset, The New Psychology of Success, explains that people with a fixed mindset see failure as proof that they are not good enough. But people with a growth mindset see failure as feedback, as a teacher. If you want to escape this trap, you must adopt a growth mindset. Every setback is not the end. It is a stepping stone. One method to fight fear of failure is to reframe it. Instead of asking, "What if I fail?" ask, "What will I learn if I fail?" That simple change in perspective can transform fear into motivation. Step-by-step guide to escaping mental traps. Awareness. Notice when you are procrastinating, chasing perfection, or avoiding action because of fear. Awareness is the first step to change. Break it down. Start with small, manageable steps. Big goals overwhelm. Small steps empower. Set time limits. Give yourself deadlines. Not endless time to perfect, but strict limits to act. Shift your language. Replace "I can't do this" with "I will learn from this." Replace "it must be perfect" with "it must be done." Celebrate progress. Reward yourself not for perfection, but for progress. Each step forward is victory. Key takeaways for you. Procrastination is not laziness, it's avoidance. Beat it with small actions like the 2-minute rule. Perfectionism is fear in disguise. Progress matters more than perfect results. Fear of failure is universal, but reframing it as a learning opportunity unlocks growth. Mental traps shape thought patterns, but with awareness and action, you can break free. Remember this, your thoughts are powerful, but they are not prisons. You have the ability to choose action over delay, progress over perfection, and courage over fear. The leaders we admire didn't succeed because they were flawless. They succeeded because they refused to stay trapped. Now it's your turn. Look at the goals you've been postponing. Ask yourself, what's one small step I can take today? Then do it, because action is the only way out of mental traps. And before we move to the next chapter, I have one request. If this audiobook has been helping you, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. That way, more people can break free from these traps and start building better thought patterns for personal improvement. Chapter 13, Critical Thinking in Relationships. Let's take a moment and think about the relationships in your life. How many times have you found yourself in an argument, not because of the actual issue, but because of how the conversation unfolded? Maybe words were misinterpreted. Maybe emotions got in the way. Or maybe, just maybe, the real problem wasn't the disagreement itself, but the way we think and respond to each other. Critical thinking is often spoken about in the context of business, leadership, or problem solving. But one of its most powerful applications is in relationships, whether with friends, partners, family members, colleagues, or even strangers. At its heart, Critical thinking in relationships means learning to listen, reason, and connect more deeply without letting assumptions and emotions cloud our interactions. Let's break this down step by step. Listening and reasoning in conversations. The truth is, most people don't listen to understand. They listen to reply. Think about it. While someone is talking, your brain is often preparing what you'll say next, or judging their words, or connecting their story to your own experiences. This habit robs us of true understanding. Critical thinking in conversations starts with slowing down and asking, what is really being said here? Listening actively means focusing not just on words, but also on tone, body language, and context. It means holding back your urge to jump in, so you can truly understand the other person's perspective. Consider the example of Angela Merkel, the former German chancellor. She was often described as one of the world's most powerful women, not because she spoke the loudest, but because she listened the deepest. Merkel was known for her patience in discussions, sometimes sitting silently for long stretches before giving a calm, measured response. Her ability to listen and then reason clearly earned her respect even in the most tense negotiations. She embodied a critical thinker in relationships, choosing understanding over reaction. Now ask yourself, when was the last time you truly listened without interrupting, without rushing to respond? Avoiding arguments by asking better questions. Here's the secret. Arguments rarely arise from differences in facts. They come from differences in assumptions. And assumptions live in the background, often unspoken. Critical thinkers learn to uncover assumptions not by fighting harder, but by asking better questions. Instead of reacting with, "You're wrong," a critical thinker asks, "Can you help me understand why you see it that way?" This shifts the energy of the conversation. It moves from conflict to curiosity. Let me give you a simple analogy. Imagine two people looking at the same coin. One insists it's a head, the other swears it's a tail. Both are correct, they're just looking from different sides. The only way to resolve the disagreement is not by yelling louder, but by asking questions that invite perspective. What do you see? Can I look at it from your side? This is where the wisdom of Socrates comes in. Socrates believed the best way to uncover truth was not to state it outright, but to ask thoughtful questions. This method, now called the Socratic method, is still used in law schools, coaching, and leadership. It's powerful because it encourages deeper reasoning and exposes blind spots without creating defensiveness. A practical step for you. The next time tension rises in a conversation, instead of pushing your point, pause and ask, "What makes this important to you?" Or, "What do you need me to understand here?" You'll be surprised how quickly walls come down when curiosity replaces criticism. Using thought awareness to build stronger connections. Every relationship, personal or professional, thrives on connection. But here's the challenge. Our own thought patterns often get in the way. We carry invisible baggage, prejudices, fears, past experiences, that color how we interpret others' words and actions. Critical thinking asks us to become aware of these filters. For example, do you assume your partner's silence means they're upset? Do you assume your colleague's suggestion is criticism rather than collaboration? Do you jump to conclusions before clarifying? By becoming aware of our thought patterns, we create space between what happens and how we react. That space is where connection is built. Consider the leadership style of Jacinda Ardern, former Prime Minister of New Zealand. She was widely admired not just for her policies, but for her ability to connect with people emotionally while still reasoning logically. When tragedy struck her nation, she chose empathy first, listening, comforting, showing presence, while also guiding with clear, rational decision-making. This balance of thought awareness and human connection strengthened her bond with her people. In your own life, you can practice this by pausing to check your thoughts before reacting. Ask yourself, am I responding to what was actually said, or to the story I'm telling myself about what was said? That tiny moment of awareness can transform misunderstandings into deeper trust. Author Stephen R. Covey, in his timeless book The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, wrote, "Seek first to understand, then to be understood." This principle captures the essence of critical thinking in relationships. Understanding comes before persuasion. Curiosity comes before judgment. And connection comes before correction. Key takeaways from this chapter. Listen to understand, not to respond. Practice active listening. Focus on the message, not your comeback. Ask better questions. Use curiosity to replace arguments. Questions open doors that statements close. Be aware of your thought patterns. Recognize when assumptions or past experiences are shaping your reactions. Connection over correction. Strengthen relationships by building trust, not by proving you're right. Remember the coin. Every perspective has another side. Take the time to see it. Imagine what would happen if you applied critical thinking in your relationships every single day. Conversations would flow with less conflict. Arguments would transform into dialogue. And your connections with loved ones, colleagues, and even strangers would grow stronger and more meaningful. The truth is, the quality of your relationships is the quality of your life. And mastering your thought patterns and how you listen, question, and connect is the key to making those relationships thrive. So, I'll leave you with this question. In your very next conversation, will you choose to react? Or will you choose to think critically, listen deeply, and connect more meaningfully? If this chapter gave you new insight, don't keep it to yourself. Make sure to like this video, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the rest of this audiobook. Together, let's build a community of critical thinkers who not only improve themselves, but also their relationships. Chapter 14, Building a Daily Practice. Let me ask you something. If you wanted to build physical strength, would you go to the gym just once and expect muscles the next day? Of course not. You would train daily, little by little, until your body grew stronger. The same principle applies to your mind. Critical thinking is like a muscle. It doesn't grow overnight. It develops through small, consistent practices that sharpen your focus, strengthen your reasoning, and give you clarity in every decision you make. In this chapter, we are going to build your mental gym routine. I'll walk you through small but powerful exercises that you can practice daily. These routines, journaling, reflection, and questioning, will help you train your brain just like an athlete trains for success. Sharpening thinking with daily micro-practices. Let's start with something simple. Every morning, before you dive into your busy day, take 2 minutes. Yes, just 2 minutes, to ask yourself one question. What is the most important thing I should focus on today? This small habit keeps your thoughts aligned with your priorities. It helps you avoid being pulled in 1,000 directions by distractions. Think of it as mental stretching before the workout begins. One of the great world leaders of the 20th century, Margaret Thatcher, once said, "Watch your thoughts, for they will become actions. Watch your actions, for they will shape your character." This was not just a statement of belief. It was how she lived her life. Every day, she set her mind deliberately on what mattered most, rather than letting the noise of the world decide for her. If she could discipline her thoughts in the midst of leading a nation, imagine what you could achieve with a few minutes of intentional thought each day. The power of journaling. The second exercise is journaling. Now, don't roll your eyes. This is not about writing a perfect diary. It's about giving your mind a mirror. At the end of the day, sit with a pen and paper and ask yourself 3 simple questions. What did I do well today? Where did my thinking fail me? What can I do differently tomorrow? By answering these questions honestly, you begin to see patterns in your thinking. You notice where you rush into decisions, where emotions take over, or where you shine. Consider Abraham Lincoln. History tells us that during the darkest days of leadership, he would often write letters, raw, emotional letters, to people he disagreed with. But here's the interesting part. Many of those letters were never sent. They were simply exercises in reflection, a way for him to process his thoughts and release emotional tension before making rational choices. Journaling does the same for you. It clears your mental clutter, turning confusion into clarity. Reflection as a daily habit. The third practice is daily reflection. This is not about sitting for hours. It can be as short as 5 minutes of quiet thought. Ask yourself, Did my actions today align with my values? Did I listen before I judged? Did I challenge my own assumptions? This is how you avoid living life on autopilot. You become conscious of your thought patterns and intentional about shaping them. Lee Kuan Yew, the founding father of modern Singapore, was known for his reflective thinking. He would often take long walks alone in the evening, not to escape his duties, but to reflect on them. Those quiet moments gave him the clarity to make some of the most transformative decisions in his country's history. Reflection was his secret weapon, and it can be yours too. Questioning as a daily mental workout. Now let's move to questioning, the heart of critical thinking. Every day, choose one assumption you hold and test it. It could be about work, relationships, or even yourself. For example, do I really need to do this the way I've always done it? Is my opinion based on facts or on feelings? What if the opposite were true? These questions break the chains of habitual thinking and open doors to new possibilities. Socrates, the ancient philosopher, built his entire teaching method around questions. Instead of giving answers, he asked his students to challenge themselves. That is why his method, the Socratic method, is still studied thousands of years later. Because questioning, when done daily, is one of the most powerful tools of the mind. Training the brain like a muscle. Imagine your brain as a muscle. When you skip practice, it weakens. But with daily training, small, consistent exercises, it grows sharper, stronger, and more resilient. Journaling is like lifting weights. It strengthens clarity. Reflection is like stretching. It keeps your mind flexible. Questioning is like cardio. It builds endurance against shallow thinking. And just like in physical training, consistency matters more than intensity. 10 minutes of deliberate thought every day is more powerful than 2 hours of scattered thinking once a month. As James Clear wrote in Atomic Habits, you do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. The system you build, the daily practice of thinking, is what will carry you to personal improvement. Key takeaways for you. Start small. 2 minutes in the morning to set your focus. Journal daily. Ask yourself what went well, what didn't, and what can improve. Reflect every evening. Align your actions with your values. Question one assumption daily. This sharpens your ability to see beyond the obvious. Consistency beats intensity. Train your brain like a muscle. Now let me coach you directly. Don't just listen to these ideas, practice them. Pick one exercise today, even if it's just writing one sentence in a journal or asking yourself one question. Because the real transformation happens not in theory, but in practice. You have the power to shape your thought patterns, one small step at a time. And before we move on to the final chapter, I have a simple request. If this audiobook has given you value, if you've learned even one thing that can improve your life, then make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Not only does it support this channel, but it also ensures that you stay connected as we continue this journey together. So, are you ready to step into your daily mental gym and train your brain like never before? Let's get started. Chapter 15, Living as a Critical Thinker. Take a moment and imagine this. You've reached the end of a long journey. You've climbed a mountain of knowledge, one step at a time, learning how your thoughts shape your life, how biases sneak in, how emotions cloud judgment, and how clarity can be built through practice. Now, at the top of this mountain, you can see the view clearly, the view of a life lived with critical thinking as your compass. This chapter is about that moment. It's about living as a critical thinker. Not just learning the tools, not just practicing occasionally, but actually making it part of who you are, your identity. Because when critical thinking becomes who you are, not just what you do, it changes everything. Think about leaders who left a lasting mark on history. For example, Angela Merkel, the former Chancellor of Germany, was often described as the scientist politician. Why? Because she approached problems with calm analysis, clarity, and patience. She was trained as a physicist, and she carried that scientific mindset into politics. She didn't rush to decisions. She examined evidence, asked questions, and thought carefully before acting. Whether you agreed with her politics or not, Her method showed the power of living as a critical thinker, consistently over years, until it defined her leadership style. Or take the story of Lee Kuan Yew, the first Prime Minister of Singapore. When he took leadership, his country faced enormous challenges: poverty, lack of resources, and uncertainty about the future. Instead of relying on emotions or copying others, he relied on reasoned decisions, long-term thinking, and the discipline to resist quick fixes. His leadership was rooted in careful observation and logical planning. This wasn't just critical thinking in action, it was critical thinking as an identity. These examples remind us that the difference between simply knowing about critical thinking and actually living it is like the difference between reading about swimming and actually diving into the water. One keeps you dry, the other transforms you. Now, how do you make this shift for yourself? Let's break it down step by step. 1. Adopt a daily reflection practice. Critical thinking begins when you pause and reflect. At the end of each day, ask yourself, what decision did I make today? Did I act on impulse or analysis? What did I learn from my thought process? This simple habit creates awareness. Over time, you'll start noticing your thinking patterns as they happen, not just in hindsight. 2. Train your curiosity. Critical thinkers don't settle for surface-level answers. They ask why and how. They dig deeper. For example, when you read a headline or hear a piece of news, don't just accept it. Ask, who benefits if I believe this? What evidence supports it? What other perspectives exist? This habit of curiosity prevents you from being manipulated by incomplete or misleading information. 3. Balance logic and humanity. One of the biggest misconceptions is that critical thinking means being cold and logical all the time. But true critical thinking balances logic with empathy. Take Jacinda Ardern, former Prime Minister of New Zealand. Her leadership during crises showed not only clear analysis but also compassion. She combined facts with humanity, showing that being a critical thinker doesn't mean shutting off emotions. It means using them wisely alongside reason. 4. Build resilience against mental traps. Life will always throw challenges at you: setbacks, failures, pressures. A true critical thinker doesn't crumble under these. Instead, they pause, analyze, and respond with clarity. Think of Abraham Lincoln. He faced countless failures before becoming president: failed businesses, failed campaigns, even personal loss. Yet he used each experience to refine his thinking, learning from mistakes instead of being defined by them. Critical thinking gave him resilience, the ability to keep going, learning, and adjusting. 5. Commit to lifelong learning. Critical thinking is not a one-time skill. It's a lifelong journey. Books, conversations, experiences, they're all opportunities to sharpen your mind. As Albert Einstein once said in Ideas and Opinions, the important thing is not to stop questioning. Curiosity has its own reason for existence. That quote perfectly captures the heart of living as a critical thinker. It's about being endlessly curious, open to growth, and committed to evolving your mind. Now let's turn this back to you. Living as a critical thinker doesn't mean you'll never make mistakes. You will. It doesn't mean you'll always have the perfect answer. You won't. But it does mean you'll approach life with clarity, confidence, and the ability to adapt. You'll stop being a prisoner of old habits and start becoming the author of your own decisions. Think about it. How different would your life look if you paused before reacting, questioned your assumptions, and based your choices on clear reasoning? How much stronger would your relationships be? How much better would your career, your health, your happiness be? Living as a critical thinker means you don't just drift through life, you steer it. Key takeaways for you. Identity shift. Don't just do critical thinking, become a critical thinker. Make it part of who you are. Daily practice, reflection, curiosity, and questioning should be daily habits, not occasional exercises. Balance. Combine logic with empathy, facts with feelings. That balance is the mark of a mature thinker. Resilience. Use critical thinking to bounce back from challenges stronger and wiser. Lifelong growth. Keep learning, questioning, and refining. Critical thinking is not a destination, but a lifelong journey. And now, I'll leave you with a challenge. Starting today, commit to living as a critical thinker. The next time you face a choice, big or small, pause and ask yourself, am I reacting on impulse or am I reasoning with clarity? That small question has the power to change your life. Thank you for walking this journey through thought patterns and critical thinking. If you found value in this audiobook, don't keep it to yourself. Like it, share it, and subscribe so others can grow with you. Together, we can create a world of thinkers, not just followers. Now the question is, are you ready to live as a critical thinker? And here we are, the end of this journey, but truly just the beginning of yours. You've explored the power of thought patterns, uncovered how biases shape your choices, learned the discipline of reflection, and discovered how critical thinking can transform not only your decisions, but your entire way of life. Now remember this, knowledge without action fades quickly, but knowledge applied becomes wisdom. The difference between drifting through life and living with purpose lies in your daily choices. So, as you step forward, carry with you the identity of a critical thinker, curious, resilient, balanced, and open to lifelong learning. Every decision, every conversation, every challenge is now an opportunity to practice. Don't wait for a perfect moment. Start now. Start today. As one wise author once wrote in Thinking, Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, nothing in life is as important as you think it is, while you are thinking about it. Let that be your reminder. Pause, reflect, and choose with clarity. I want to thank you for spending this time with me. Your willingness to invest in your mind and your growth is proof that you're already on the path to mastery. And before you go, if this audiobook has added value to your life, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. It helps us reach more people who are searching for clarity, wisdom, and personal growth, just like you. This is not the end. It's the next step. Keep questioning, keep learning, and most importantly, keep living as a critical thinker. Until next time, stay thoughtful, stay curious, and stay committed to your best self.